Zach is back with another Netflix original review. Today I'm reviewing Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Dark Crystal is a movie made back in the 1980s, and I never saw that movie. I saw other movies that kind of were in the kind of puppet genre, like The Labyrinth. I really like that movie. I also like The Muppets. So I was into sort of some of that stuff, but not all of it, and I never got around to watching Dark Crystal. But to be honest with you guys, this movie kind of surprised me. It was actually pretty good for what I was expecting. And my god, you guys, look at the cast of this movie. It's freaking crazy. And there's too many people that I have to name. So just watch this. Just look at this. Yeah, the casting's crazy in this movie. For example, the narrator, Sigourney Weaver. I thought I recognized the voice. I was like, that voice sounds so familiar. Sigourney Weaver, you guys. And also Mark Hamill's a voice in this movie. So just try to find him before I tell you who he is. So the main storyline focuses around a certain group of evil vulture creatures called the Skeksis or whatever. I think it's Skeksis. Let me look that up. Yes, it's Skeksis. And that's one of the hard things about this movie or show. I'm going to say both, the movie and the show, is that they have a lot of names and things that they refer to that have a very different name and meaning. Like the only things that are kind of dissimilar is Mom, Dad, and Lord, and I think King in general. Those are the only regular words you hear from the dictionary in this movie. Everything else is a completely different made-up word, and sometimes you kind of get confused, what is going on? What are they talking about? And they kind of focus on what they're talking about, but man, it's kind of hard to draw you in when you don't know what the heck's going on, because all the definitions and dialogue in the movie is so weird and kind of not even medieval. It's alien almost. The Skeks are, I guess you'd say, the people, the guardian of this thing called the Crystal of Truth, right? And they kind of run the show in this land. I guess you could call them lords or whatever. They call them different things. It's hard to understand some of the dialogue. I already went into that. But anyways, they're the lords of the land. Everyone looks up to them for advice and information. They kind of are the bigwigs around there, right? Well, they end up being corrupt, like some bigwigs are, They corrupt the crystal, corrupt the crystal, and they start using it to further their life, exponentially have them live longer. And they also do experiments on the crystal that make it so that they can suck life from other creatures and then make a weird soupy drug out of it that then they can use to, I guess you'd say, give them eternal life. They basically sacrifice something else, some life, and add it to their own. And that's kind of the gist of the story. Also, too, when they make the drug, this I call it a drug because you'll figure out what happens in a second. But once they drink it, they start going a little crazy. So at first in the show, I thought the vulture Skeksis creatures were kind of a lame villain. I was these guys are just the obvious we're bad guy villains. But they end up kind of fleshing out their characters, and they also end up making them kind of crazy and actually evil and creepy when they start going insane from this drug. So I think that was pretty cool, and they did a good job at making the storyline pretty simple, where the good guys find out about the situation, and then the lords, basically, because that's what the Skeksis are trying to basically stop them from spewing out that information that they're corrupting the crystal. It's basically we have to get rid of this guy. We need to get rid of this guy who found out our secrets, and we got to kill him. You know, Jeffrey Epstein style. It's just oh, he knows too much. We got to kill him. That's basically just the story. Good guy knows something. Bad guys don't want him to spew the information. We got to kill the good guys. Good guys on the roll to get the heck out of there, and also get that information to the right sources and people. That's the gist of the story. Works well. I liked it. Bad guys cool. Good guys cool. Gotcha. I'm in. Got it. Good story. So Rian is the one who finds out the information, and he's also the son to this general guy. He has to kind of go on a voyage by himself and get the information of the right sources, and also not die from these, Skeksis trying to kill him and send hitmen after him. So that's pretty cool. That was a good storyline. There's also a couple other storylines too. So there's another storyline too about a princess that just knows too much, kind of like Rian, except instead of about the Skeks and Skeks killing people and using the crystal for corrupt purposes, she basically just knows too much through books. She just kind of reads too much in the library and finds out that people might be using the crystal in a wrong way, and she also figures out some sort of magic situations. I can't go too much into it, but she kind of just gets pushed aside by her parents. Her parents, I wouldn't call them like corrupt. They're just kind of ignorant and don't want her getting into trouble that she shouldn't be getting into. You know what I mean? So that's that storyline. There's also another storyline. There's also a storyline about Deet. Deet is kind of the person that knows the most about the land around her, because she actually lives in the land, and she also is this type of character that's kind of like Smeagol, not decrepit and stuff like that, but she lives in a cave. Her whole race lives way underneath the ground inside this, it's kind of like this glowing cave with like glowing fungus and stuff like that. Pretty cool. Basically, she starts figuring out that the land around her is starting to get corrupt, like animals, worms, things that aren't supposed to be evil are starting to turn evil due to the corruption of the crystal. She finds that out because she just knows the land so much, and she's like, alright, well, obviously something's going on, I have to go figure this out. And I think she has one of the cooler storylines, or at least the most interesting, because she goes outside her cave to go talk about whatever's going on to her land, and because she lives in a cave, she can't see really well outside. Like, she has a problem looking at just the outside world in the sunlight. So she has to like wear like a mask or just like a bandana to prevent her from becoming blind. So she kind of stumbles like Bird Box out into the woods and she has to avoid danger while doing that, which I thought that was pretty interesting. She ends up getting her sight later, but I think it was pretty interesting how they did her character in the beginning. And I like her character because she just first thing looks cooler than a lot of the other characters, and she has the most interesting kind of development when it comes to the beginning of her story. I liked it. Okay, now about my opinion. So, I actually really liked the show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't have high hopes for the show, and that might be the reason why I enjoyed it so much, but it's almost like Game of Thrones if it was made for like teenagers, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of like political intrigue and political nonsense and trying to, corruption, overthrowing people, things like that in this show. It's just done in a less mature nature, if that makes any sense. A little less mature, some things don't make as much sense. They just kind of throw in memories and magic and things that are convenience, and like it just kind of moves the show quicker along than in Game of Thrones, where there's there's like real world stuff that you have to deal with that isn't just cured with magic. How do I say it? It's like Game of Thrones just for teenagers. That's the best way to explain it. But I like the brutality in the show, because there's actually some brutal moments. It's not as bad as Game of Thrones, like I said before. It's, probably for teenagers. But it was in that time, it kind of feels like, in the 80s, when they made kids movies, like PG movies, they actually had like some people that could be naked in PG movies. It felt kind of like that in this show, where it was like, movies for kids also could have some mature content in it. They were like, let's kind of screw these kids up and kind of frighten them. If we're gonna be frightened, we're gonna be frightening. They did that in the show quite a bit. Like, they did some stuff where I was like, you know what? If I was like a kid, if I was like a little kid, this would actually scare me, and I enjoy that. Thank you, show, for not being so like, babying the audience. It's a show made for kind of kid-like. It's like, it seems like a show made for kids or teenagers, but it doesn't feel as if they're trying to like restrain too much when it comes to like brutality and scares and things like that. I like that. The dialogue in the show is pretty well done too. It's never unnecessary dialogue. It feels like they narrowed it down, they got what they needed to say, they pushed it out there. There's never any like side missions or things that are just kind of like out of the ordinary, or out of the blue. Like, things that just don't need to happen, that they just add into the show. Everything seems pretty tight and well written and necessary for the storyline of the show. So I enjoyed that too. The best thing about the show, in my opinion, is the world is it's crafted very well. The characters at first, it's a little jarring if you don't watch like these kind of puppet sort of shows, because when you're watching it, you're like, this is kind of weird. You can kind of tell that they're puppets and stuff like that. But they all have their own uniqueness to them, and the world around them all has, it's very unique and doesn't ever feel like you're on the planet Earth. It always felt like you're on a different planet, and you actually end up getting sucked into the world, just kind of going like, wow, this place, it feels like I'm on another planet right now, because there's all these puppet creatures. No one looks like a human in this show. They look kind of, maybe, but, all of them look really weird, out of the ordinary, interesting creatures. Even like the cars and like things that you would normally think of as like normal worldly things, like a wagon, they have these weird special things that they add to that make it interesting. You know, like there's like little like little guys at the bottom that are like the wheels that kind of flip and turn the thing. It's interesting. It's just everything about the show. When you're looking at it, even if let's say you're at a scene that's kind of not, I wouldn't say boring, but it's just a little slower paced, you know, everything around it is pretty interesting. You just kind of watch and just going, wow, that's interesting. Wow, look at that. That's interesting too. Whoa, look at that. It's interesting. Everything's pretty cool looking, and you actually end up getting kind of immersed into the show. It feels very immersive once you watch the first couple episodes. You're like, all right, I'm in. I like this world. It's different. It's very alien-like. It's almost like if you added like medieval times to another planet. That's the best way to describe the feeling of the world in this show. You could tell that when someone was directing this, they had a vision and they wanted to stick with it, and it felt like it came from somebody's heart, like one person's heart. It didn't feel like a bunch of people from different companies were trying to come together and create the most profitable show possible, or something like that. It feels like it was somebody's work that someone had in their head. Somebody was thinking about this world and put it on paper and then made it into a movie or show. Both the old movie and this show. So I really enjoyed it. It felt like a breath of fresh air, if that makes any sense. It was way different than anything I've watched before. So with all the good stuff in this show, there is some things that do annoy me and bother me in this show. One of the things that bothered me the most is this thing called dreamcasting. It's not called dreamcasting, but I call it that because I just like the dreamcast. Anyways, getting off topic. Basically, the characters in this show can do this thing called dreamcasting where if you need information from somebody, or let's say if you want to know if they're lying or not, you basically just touch their hand and they can see if you're telling the truth or not through memory. Like, they can see your memories. It's almost like Avatar. You know how they can, like, take their little string of hair and, like, put it into something and they connect with that person? Well, it's the same thing in this show, where basically they connect with the person and can see their memories and, if they're telling the truth or they're lying, if they're a good person, like, basically everything about this person. And it's almost too convenient to be put in a show that makes any sense. Because it's not just, like, one person that can do that. Everybody in this particular race can do this. And it almost doesn't make any sense in the broad scheme of the narrative, because the narrative is about these people being corrupt and a guy basically on the run from, I guess you'd say, tyrants trying to get Hitman to kill him, right? And one of the things that they do in the show is the tyrant people basically start using or making propaganda about this person to make him, I should say, a bad person in the population's eyes, right? It's not really a spoiler because it happens like really early in the show, and it's kind of the catalyst that kind of makes the show's narrative proceed. The whole show is based around those two things, so I kind of have to explain it to you. But I just don't get it where it's like, oh well, we can't trust this guy because the lords told us he's a bad guy, but then you also have this ability where you can just touch any old individual's hand and tell them, you can see if they're telling the truth or not. It's almost like, with that power, there shouldn't be any lying in this society at all. There shouldn't be any lying. It should just be, it should be non-existent, because someone could just go, "What's up, buddy?" Boom. "Oh, hey, I know you're a good guy. I know this and that about you. I know that you're not lying." It's just kind of weird that they didn't utilize that as much in the show as possible. And they do actually utilize it a lot. It's just that not in the way that I think they would utilize it. They basically utilize it for telling the narrative of the story, or let's say flashbacks for certain characters. They use this dreamcasting to tell backstories for characters just conveniently, And I hate, it's almost like a it's basically like flashbacks, and I hate when people explain things through flashbacks in shows and movies in general, and they use that for a couple of the characters and to tell certain parts of the story, and it's annoying at that point. And then when they get done telling those things about those characters in the story with these memories, right, then when I was like, why don't you just use the Dreamcast, because these guys are trying to kill you and you need to clear your name, they never fucking use it. So it's kind of like, when they do need to use it, I'm just like, why don't you use it? And they don't ever use it. But then when I'm like, I'd rather you show me than tell me about certain things that happened in the past, you know? They're just like, oh, let me just explain it to you through like really convenient flashbacks. So it's like they utilize the dream casting in this show for like just convenience than for like a storytelling perspective, and it's kind of annoying. Yeah, flashbacks are just not a good way to tell a story in my opinion. That's just me. I do like the show. The casting is just phenomenal. The characters are pretty cool and well written. The story is pretty well written. The atmosphere and the I guess you say the world around them, you know what I mean? That is the best part about the show. The story is good. It's just that they do utilize some kind of dream sequences and flashbacks through this thing called dream casting that, you know, they're just kind of like, yo, what's up, bro? And then they kind of dream cast to tell really easy things that they didn't need to do this dream casting thing. You know, they kind of just use it for just convenience. And then when they did need to use it for a plot purpose, they never used it. So it's just kind of that part annoyed me, but everything else was pretty good. For me, I'd go ahead and give this show a good B+. It's pretty interesting. It's well written. The story makes sense for the most part. It's just a little annoying at some points where they start doing this really convenient shit that you're just like, all right, I don't need to know. I don't need the convenience. Just I'm not stupid. Just let me go on through the show. Sometimes mystery is better. You don't have to tell me about a character and their whole backstory with a dream sequence. If I can just I can just put pieces together, man. You know what I mean? Just tell me through the story. You're good. Don't do the dream sequence stuff. That's all I have to say. So I'll go ahead and give this show a B+. I think that's a good marker for this show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe and do all of that YouTube business. Please click the little bell because I'm going to be putting more reviews up soon. Until next time, you guys. See you!